Welcome. This is Dr. Kurt Johnson, the host of The Convergence on Voice America. And we're here continuing our conversation from episode 2, which was on spiritual practice. And our guests on that episode were Ken Wilber, Father Thomas Keating, Locke Kelly, and from the yoga community, Karuna and Elena Brower. And Karuna is back with us today, and we're joined by someone we're so happy to have, who's one of the most well-known personalities in the global yoga community, and that is Shiva Rea. So we're going to be talking, of course, about yoga. And first thing I'm going to ask each of them to do is to say hello, say a little bit about themselves, and then we'll field the topic for this segment. So I'll start with Shiva.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Karuna. I have a global school for living yoga that was really based on the roots and evolution of vinyasa as a form of living in balance. So it draws upon the root practices of Tantra, Ayurveda, Bhakti Yoga, and Kalaripayattu, and then evolves really into a yoga for everyone. So it has teacher training, it has yoga adventure retreats, and also an online school. And really the whole mission is to help everyone connect to the healing intelligence that is within them and to have a relationship to this many, many paths of yoga that lead to the heart.
So Karuna.
Hi there again. Nice to see you all. We have a beautiful community here of Kundalini Yoga practitioners. I study worldwide with most of the practitioners that have been with Yogi Bhajan for the last 40-some years. So I got to get it hands down, sadly not from Yogi Bhajan himself, but feels like I have. And all the great wise beings like Shiva and, and Sean Korn and all these beautiful teachers that were in my life in Santa Monica years ago. And then that brought me here to Boulder, Colorado, where I hold teacher training programs and now developing more of a convergence of more teacher training programs and manuals and online courses as well with Contemplative Journal. I've got an online course and retreats worldwide, and just having a lot of wonderful experiences, getting closer and closer to women, men, youthful beings, teenagers, and even kids yoga and prenatal yoga. So all those certified and all those willing. Like I said to someone the other day, you don't need to book me too far in advance. I'll come. I'm right there for you. So.
All right. So that's exactly what we wanted to dedicate this segment to. The audience, you'll find it's very easy to track these segments, and we just did one earlier on just the whole scene of yoga worldwide and why it's so important and what's happening. So in this segment, I just want Shiva and Karuna to have a chance to say more about the particular path that they've walked, the particular teachings and styles that they've developed, and the audiences that they're cultivating. So that's kind of where we want to go. And I want to mention that one of my jobs at the UN is to be on the committee for International Yoga Day, and one of our jobs is to acquaint the world with what's going on across the whole yoga landscape. So it's a great opportunity then to hear about both of these teachers. So Shiva, say more then about what you've developed and what you do and what it aims at and all that.
Well, if we could say that actually it's not teacher training, but learning to be a servant of the life force, I think that's really more accurate. And so for me, being part of the evolution of particularly vinyasa is something that happened to me, 25 years ago as I started to teach. The root teachings that I was studying, particularly with Ashtanga Vinyasa from Sri Patabi Joyce and other of the core teachers in Krishnamacharya lineage, there was a need for another space that was not a set practice, that could speak to a wide range of people from all backgrounds. And I think that transformed my destiny to try and understand what's the relationship of the roots and why is it important at times to then evolve from the roots. So for the last 25 years of teaching, there's been an incubation that is in some ways getting closer to the roots, but in some ways is transforming a lot of models that I think are evolutionary and in a way kind of necessary to our collective destiny. And I don't mean to say that with lofty terms, but primarily in prana vinyasa, we practice in a circle. And that has had a transformative effect. Just the normal, beautiful model of facing your teachers and listening. I think when we look at the roots, when I've gone to my root teachers, there's the thing of the altar in the temple, whether it's underneath a tree, like in Bodh Gaya, or where you can do prostrations and experience direct practice. I think that model is problematic in the West. We tend to hide, we tend to separate. Our yoga mat becomes literally like a box. And so I found as a teacher, particularly as a female teacher, when I first began teaching, that my personal evolution, and then eventually in terms of offering a synthesis space of prana vinyasa, is not just, I really can't stand this idea of branding or, oh, I've created a new style of yoga. I don't feel that at all. I feel like I try and dive deeper to understand the roots and be very responsible for everything that has evolved, because it's really been a very slow simmer. And the main core of what has happened in terms of this evolutionary form is that it's a mandala of over 40 namaskars, which some people would say, oh, you mean like sun salutation variations. And so I've really taken, from when I first started doing my teacher training, a responsibility to bring the roots of yoga in the Western world more in balance. So I didn't even know that there was a moon salutation until I went back to the roots and studied in the Bihar school. And then now in Vinyasa, we start at the roots, and now the students and the teachers learn sun and moon salutation. And then we learn the classical Ashtanga namaskar, sun salutation. But then we really dive into what is this essence of namaskar. It does not mean salutation. It means to open ourselves to a process that actually can't easily be brought to one meaning. If we say nama means bow, some people may get resistance. It's really like realizing something with your whole being. And every time there's a sunset or a full moon rising, there's some awe that comes into us. So I really felt that was missing. I felt like we are doing salutations because somebody decided maybe in colonial times that namaskar meant sun salutations. So I got a lot of flack in the beginning for these simple changes. And I don't mean flack like in direct dialogue, but a sense of being fringe, because I wasn't just doing this, I wasn't just doing Ashtanga. And now it's a different environment, and I feel like that's the opportunity. So these 40 namaskars are really based in something that I'm very dedicated to now on International Peace Day, is encouraging people in September 21st is the International Peace Day, and to practice. You hear this echo?
Yeah, I think it's a break in the signal. We'll just put up with it. We'll just say it's the gods and goddesses.
My current mission is to teach people prostrations. that before there was the Surya Namaskar, and that's in some scholarly debate as to what form that looked like. But we have, all the way from the Vedas, we have records of prostrations. And that's actually universal to Buddhist, to Muslim and Sufi communities, to Christian communities, to actually on Earth Day, we were doing this practice that I've now evolved that has yoga asanas within it. And we call it a prana flow pranam, that ultimately we're bowing to our life force. And so we were around this Chumash sacred fire that is this environmental center, and everybody from every walk of life, some people in wheelchairs, do this practice. And so now on the UN International Peace Day, we encourage people to offer 108 or come together across different forms of yoga and really experience movement meditation. So I've kind of been taken on this personal journey, and I felt challenged as both a woman and also having an academic background to do this slowly, but not be afraid to change the square to the circle. Not be afraid to bring the moon and the sun back into relationship, because I was becoming imbalanced. And the only way that I could heal myself, even from a broken pelvis where I couldn't do any asanas, was actually to return back to this simple pulse. So that's really what Prana Vinyasa, I would say, is known for, is that you can feel in all the movement this pulse of life, which for me is like a retrieval. I don't mean to say it's in a funny way, but it's a retrieval of our energy in the face of this zombie apocalypse vision that we're always given, where people are like deadened. No, we're alive. And to bow to the life force, I think, is something that is the gift of yoga. We have to kind of go forms and turn to the teachers who've always had this wisdom and bring it forward.
All right, thank you. Again, I mean, there's so many things that I could say just from my own background and my experience with yoga, particularly in Karuna's community. But I want to go right over then to Karuna and just see where you go with all that, because all of us have gone such an amazing road in what we've developed into and what we do. So, Karuna, tell us about what that's looked like for you.
Well, I'd love to use one of my first teachers, who is Shiva Rea, in this example. Sister, yeah. Touches my heart, actually. Because we start somewhere, right? And where do we start? And a lot of us women who are considered, beautiful, intelligent, powerful, mothers, sometimes not, get a little bullied by mentors. And because the mentors still need to do work. And it showed me so much to say, that's okay, of course, they're human. And yoga is about union and this core value of men and women coming together. And why should we ever hesitate in such a way to compare or compete? So as I sit with one of my first teachers, Shiva, when I went into, the classes in Santa Monica as a young mother, and a young practitioner, and really just, newly, freshly into a practice, I remember these days very, very well, because they gave me courage, they gave me strength, they gave me compassion and they drew me there. I didn't draw myself there. I got there somehow. And it was like the 70% Yogi Bhajan talks about showing up just to the class, just get to the dang class. And then 30% is all you have to give. Because that 30% is such a heart-shaped, it's so huge, it's like Hanuman, that you can't do anything but just observe it. and listen to it and hear it and feel other people, see other people's heart beating in the same rhythm, the same cadence. So when we were there in the 90s together in Santa Monica, it was just starting. It was so beautiful. There was no famous teachers anywhere. It was Eric Schiffman, right? Yeah. It was
Iyengar certainly was famous. Iyengar.
Well, I mean, no, big teachers, but I'm just talking of, you know, of who we are as teachers now. It just didn't matter. It was just such a deliverance of sisterhood. And then it got a little bit more engaging when I started to realize, when I talked to Sophia Diaz, who's from Boulder, and I know you know her, I hope you do. And she said, you know, I said, do you ever integrate Kundalini in anything you do? And she said, no, Karuna, that's for you to do. And I took it as wise woman download. And this is, you know, 15 years ago. And I went and I didn't dabble in it. And I took it on as this was my sole purpose, destiny in my life to do this because it resonated with me. And yeah, physically I could, you know, we love the Anusara, we love the Iyengar, we love all the perfection of this temple. This temple, when it's stretched, when it's expressed, when it's honored, when it's bowed to, when it's healing, especially, when there's pain, wherever we go with it, whether it's Kundalini or Anusara or Iyengar or whatever it is, or Hatha. Yogi Bhajan just was a 20-year, you know, was a practitioner of Hatha, but he just didn't like the loincloth. So he said, I like to dress as Raj Yoga, and he was Mahan Tantric. So he couldn't be in the loincloth anymore, you know. So, but we do your practices, and we do all practices. And what I've really taken the download recently to do, and of course through my son, because, you know, we bring up these children that are so wise. Principles of meditation, Mom. This is what you need to do next. And I was like, good idea, because we have so many meditations in Kundalini Yoga, and they are inviting me into a space where my dream world is, you know, so much more colorful. My life is even more colorful, and I see a change. I see yet another level of change through asana, yes. All the practice, yes. The movement of the body, yes. Walking in nature, yes. But then when I sit and I take these mudras, you know, and they can be really, they're all different. Today we did something where we started with Mercury, communication, then Sun, then Saturn, tolerance, and then expansion, you know, and we wrap the tattvas up, earth, wind, fire, water, ether, just 5 of those, and elevate to a place after the movement, after the gong, meditation comes in, and then we elevate to this place of like, there I am. Wow, it took me that long. And when you talked about your pelvic floor, and I'm so amazed you got through that, because the pelvic floor is something that is it's our peacock feathers. It's our, like, we're grounded on that pelvic floor. And when that pelvic floor in a woman is splayed, I don't know if you know this, Kurt, but a woman's pelvic floor is splayed because she can procreate. A man is severed. So a woman has to balance her pelvic floor every morning before she gets out of bed, really. Otherwise, she's a little bit off, and there's a little bit of anxiety, and the stressors come out, and there's a bitchiness, and there's this, and there's that. And then the woman and the man, they don't dance, like we saw with you earlier in Dimitri. They don't dance, they don't love, they don't group, they just go, and then what's next, you know? So we have to keep this dance, and we have to keep these meditations moving. And I found them to give me an element of patience that slow down, go backwards a little bit, like step backwards, move backwards, swim the backstroke a little bit, and calm the nervous system down. And let's just go with that for a little while. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite sayings at the moment is, I am not participating at the moment. You know, when you find a lot of people coming with addictions and how do I deal with not being a vegetarian? How do I, you know, all these things they think we have to pile on ourselves to be perfect beings. Well, how about if we just go baby steps, a little bit at a time, and find the artwork inside of us, find these new colors, these new fragrances, and design the interior of our being eventually as it wakes up, instead of putting all these things on top of us to feel like it's enough for that, you know, feel like it's enough. It's always enough. As a matter of fact, if we're going to always stay in this dense finite self, we would never reach infinity. And we were born with infinity in consciousness, always 36,000 feet up or higher. And so there's just this wonderful dance, like you do so well, Shiva. Oh my God, nobody does it better than you. And you know, and the other day I thought of you when I saw this 4-foot long snake crossing the road. You know, and you know, the silkiness of her movement, and she even got very long and straight for me to just witness her beauty. And this is how we pare away, and this is how we gain, and this is how we relate to each other, and this is how we do this dance, this spiral you were speaking of you know, the Ida, the Pingula, the Shishmana, the central nervous system, and we get very inventive this way. And life never ever, you know, they say if you use the word boredom, you're actually getting pretty close to being creative, because when you can get down to 0 plus 0 equals 0, good job.
Sounds like the name of a famous rock song, nothing from nothing comes nothing, right? Well, no, this is interesting. I want to go back to Shiva now. I want to say, you know, in the context of what you both were saying, that photo that Dimitri and Shiva put out on Facebook on their anniversary, and that tribute to each other, which got hundreds and hundreds of responses, and actually, for me, it was a transmission. It was completely a transmission that some of my friends I don't think could even understand. But it was really about that dance that you were just talking about. And that came across so powerfully that I wasn't surprised that you got hundreds of responses, because mine was just over the top. So Shiva, back to you. Kind of wrap this up, put it in a nutshell, and then we'll close out this segment, but take some time to wrap it up.
Yeah, I think what's so beautiful is we think of vinyasa meaning a style of yoga or connecting asanas, but really its original meaning from the Vedas into the Tantras is about an intelligent unfolding. It's exactly like what we see in nature. Mm-hmm. So I always describe to people, particularly when they're just beginning, I said, you know, now is the time to adopt a furry guru. They're all around you. Usually they're in your house. They show you exactly how to be with that life intelligence. They're never outside of it, although some dogs, I think, can be trained to get a little bit close to being kind of neurotic. And I think that's what should be a reflection for us as well. And I think that's what you were describing, Karuna, is as intense as the world is, the steps we take forward, if we think of the times when we're in our greatest flow, or when this synchronicity, or there's been life changes, or things that happen that seem impossible. I remember I used to have these earrings that were bits of the Berlin Wall that I got in Berlin. It's like the people will never forget how impossible that seemed to take that wall down. And then it just was like overnight it was down. So I think talking about the healing and the evolution that happens through each one of us is really what this deeper understanding of yoga is. Why, whether it's from Kundalini or from Vinyasa or from an indigenous form, or just contemplative breathing, going into your tradition and finding the places where you feel that unified state, where the mystery comes alive. That's always where we find ourselves when we're on our knees, when it's at that darkest point and we're not sure. We see it in nature. The sun always rises, but sometimes there's long periods of cloudiness, long periods where we might lose hope. And I think that this tracking of how the life force is unfolding in us, when we get these feelings, as you're describing, 0 plus 0, or, nowhere plus nowhere, there's a kind of dissolution from these constructs and these walls, these anxieties that really inhibit our ability to evolve, just that simply. And I think that's the spinning. The UN has been holding this space for us to evolve in a long way, and it seems so slow. But there is more peace, even as it seems we're on the brink of war every day. There is more peace. There is more human rights. There is more care for the environment. It's a slow evolution, but if it doesn't happen on the interior level, we just get at the spinning wheels, these spinning wheels, and everybody knows what that means to be in your own interior spinning wheel. And that's the power of having some tools of practice, So I hope that we can share even some simple practices that are really, for me, are like the essence. So I feel this session was in a way about our personal journey in relationship to that unfolding intelligence, and a kind of affirmation that perhaps yoga gives language to something. It's not always a particular set of techniques, but it's just simply a verb that describes for everybody, from whatever is your path, of a kind of coming together with this unified intelligence, kind of like Einstein's search for the unified field theory. We do experience inside ourselves, and I know that Einstein experienced that. He described it. But, we're on the quest. So we can't help. We will always have that evolutionary intelligence inside us.
Absolutely.
And so we might as well celebrate and allow that to be not, practice when it's empty of that connection also just spins, every teacher speaks to that. The mechanical anything can just be spinning something. Where does change happen? It happens in that direct contact, which is breathing us now. We don't have to go far.
Right.
All right, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. So you've been listening to Shiva Rea and Karuna talking about yoga, talking particularly about their path and what they offer in their work. So we're going to be back on another segment in a moment, which is actually going to be about the role of women, the whole emerging role of women globally in the whole realm of spiritual teaching. So lots of love. We'll be back in just a moment.